National Treasury has approved a 55 million rand rollover grant to boost the Nelson Mandela Bay Metro's efforts to mitigate a drought disaster. Now, the Metro has welcomed this and says it will go a long way towards improving the situation on the ground as well. I mean, we've seen dam levels being low, and this, of course, leading to much panic on the ground. Let's speak to Barry Martin, who's the Nelson Mandela Bay Metro's Water and Sanitation Director. Thank you so much to you for your time this evening. This grant is aimed at boosting some of the water projects on the ground. Let's talk about some of these. Which ones are you looking at?
Firstly, good evening to you and good evening to viewers. Yes, we've had a whole basket of various projects that we've aimed at relieving drought over the last 12 months. Obviously, first starting with an Nooit scheme that we done collectively with the Department of Water and Sanitation to make maximum use of that. Our various bore projects, a 5-kilometer pipeline that we have laid, emergency water schemes that we've put in place just for the collection of water if the taps should run dry, as well as floating a barge into the areas of the Mpofu Dam, which is now so low that we can't take water out of the dam the normal way. And these are the projects that are currently on board. And in addition to that, a more medium-term project was the upgrading of the Stanford Road and Motherwell Booster pump stations. And that was commissioned in 2017 already to bring this on board, and that is what this rollover funding will assist us with.
Let's talk about, that Stanford Motherwell pump. I mean, I've seen some reports suggesting that, the booster station, the pump stations are limited, and this, of course, makes your work a little bit difficult. Let's talk about the situation now. What is it looking like?
Firstly, as part of our drought intervention projects, the normal procedure that a pump station would operate is that you would have a standby pump set on duty for any mechanical or electrical failures or any of the others. However, as a drought intervention, we have had to make the full stations available for pumping 24/7 at all times. And as part of the long-term development of this project, allowance was made for an extra pump set at each of these installations. And this project now is the installation of these 2 pump sets with some mechanical electrical upgrades in the station to move the ability for us to pump currently at a maximum of about 105 megs per day to 120 to 135 megaliters per day. So there's a substantial increase, but it just then reinforces our ability to make maximum use of the available water that is coming 450 kilometers away from the Garib Dam.
And, tonight, someone who's watching, listening to us talk about these projects and talk about this grant, and they're just wondering, for them, what does this mean, for their situation on the ground? Does this have an impact at all towards ensuring that you do not find yourselves even further with a worsening crisis?
This is part of the medium to long-term strategy of the Nelson Mandela Bay Metro to reinforce the supply coming from the east, which is the Garib water, so that we do not land up with a situation of unintended water disruptions due to mechanical electrical failures. So you have the standby pump on duty for us there. So that is essentially just reinforcing what is termed as redundancies in terms of in the system, which means that you just taking away any potential risk of failure in the system away, and that by making the system more reliable, especially bearing in mind that going into the future, more than 50% of the water will actually come from that resource. Excuse me.
No problem, no problem. I hope you have some water nearby. When we see some of what has been said about this grant in the past, I mean, we saw even the Democratic Alliance, for example, releasing a statement saying that, the funds are not being allocated because, the Metro stood to lose them because of the mere fact that there was an inability to spend here, and saying that there were no allocations that were being done correctly. I wonder, how sure are you that you're not going to find yourselves in a situation where the funds are not being used because there is an inability, as they were alleging in August, to spend the budget?
Let me first put it this way. Firstly, this is a disaster grant. So disaster grant comes with specific grant conditions, and you can only use the money for that intended purpose. That's number one. Secondly is the money was transferred to the Nelson Mandela Bay Metro halfway through last financial year. And you cannot award a contract without all the budget in place. So once the budget was confirmed by National Treasury, we then had to set about getting that budget approved in council. Once that budget is approved on council, then you can only actually approve your contract and award the contractor. So those is just the red tape that a local government has to follow to do due diligence in terms of reporting what it does. So with all of that in place, it only happened in the latter part of the last financial year, meaning between May and June last financial year, essentially, which by default meant that we would underspend the money. And bearing in mind that we couldn't use it for any other purpose but for this project, the rollover application was then made in advance because normally rollover applications would only be made at the end of the audited financial statement, which is after August. We made this in July already through the discussions with National Treasury to actually preempt this happening. Now that we've got the grant approved as a rollover, we are able now to further pursue the contract. The contract is on site already, and this is currently being funded with our internal resources up to this point in time.
So concerns around, poor project management as well as poor financial controls that emanated in August as well. Some saying that, the record keeping was also not great. You're saying that then those are untrue because the money came through halfway through the project. So simply these are unfounded, I hear you say.
That is my take on it, because if you must understand when the money was transferred, and we have to follow due process to get the money onto the budget, because you can only spend money what is on the official budget of council. And so we have to follow that due process. And obviously after the financial year, once again, because as of the 30th of June, if the money is not spent and we don't get official consent from National Treasury that you can use it into the new financial year, we couldn't use that money. We could only use that money once they have consented to actually approve the rollover again. And up to that point in time, council counterfunded it.
In about 10 seconds, you're certain that the controls are tight? We're not going to be seeing any scandals when it comes to the spending?
Now, there's the contract is in place. There's oversight on these contractors, and we, from an internal as well as professional consultants, are on board to monitor everything, and we report this to council as part of our project monitoring reports as well.
Mr. Martin, do appreciate your time this evening. Thank you so much. That was Barry Martin, Nelson Mandela Bay Metro Water and Sanitation Director.